welcome to today's webinar, An Introduction to Financial Empowerment. My name is Natasha Pay and I'm the Community Animator with Tamarack's Vibrant Communities Canada. I'm here today with Donna McBride of Momentum, Marlene Shirato, and Glenna Harris of Prosper Canada. On the next slide, I'll just introduce each of these lovely ladies a little bit. So Donna is the Director of Operations at Momentum and one of the founding members of Calgary's multi-sectoral financial literacy collaborative in 2012. Since then, the collaborative has formally adopted the financial empowerment model, developed and resourced an operational plan, and is actively engaged in programming that works to support Calgary's poverty reduction strategy. Donna also sits on the National ABLE Steering Committee, which advances financial empowerment awareness and initiatives across Canada. In the middle there, we also have Marlene, who is a program manager at Prosper Canada. She earned a Bachelor of Business Administration after graduating from the Schulich School of Business in Toronto. Marlene later obtained an Ontario Chartered Accountant designation and gained 15 years of audit and finance experience in both the public and private sectors, predominantly in financial services industry. Marlene joined Prosper Canada in 2015 to better align her passions with her career by employing her skills and talents to enhance the lives of others. And finally, we have Glenna, who joined Prosper Canada as the Curriculum and Content Officer in 2015. She supports content development for Prosper Canada's program partnership and training curriculum across their financial empowerment initiatives and contributes to the organization's community of practice and thought leadership strategies. Glenna's background is in adult education as a former teaching professor in social geography, as well as in communications for not-for-profit and online audiences. Glenna enjoys the challenge of working in this exciting field. So welcome, Donna, Marlene, and Glenna, and thank you for joining us on today's broadcast.
Thank you very much, Natasha. We're so happy to be on the webinar today and to hear from everyone listening about your questions and your interests in financial empowerment work. We're so excited to be here. I am going to just show you our quick agenda today on the next slide, which is going to be a little bit of us talking about why we're concerned with financial empowerment, how it relates to poverty reduction, and some examples of interventions that can overcome these barriers to poverty reduction. It's a complex sphere, and there's a lot of ways to come at it, and our financial empowerment framework is something that we'll introduce to you, and Donna from Momentum is going to get into it even more in detail because it forms just the foundation for all of their work. And then we all look forward to some questions at the end of the session. So I'm going to turn things over to Marlene to take us through all of these things. So next slide, please. Thanks.
Thanks, Glenna. So according to the most recent National Household Survey, around 4.8 million Canadians live in low-income households. Living on very limited financial resources requires these Canadians to make difficult financial decisions on a day-to-day basis, since so much of their income goes towards basic needs. Often, underlying financial barriers can prevent these Canadians from successfully finding a route out of poverty. These barriers can include poor access to relevant financial information, low or non-existent savings, high debt, and many others, both personal and systemic. Identifying these barriers is the first step in forming solutions to overcome them. Financial barriers can look slightly different for different people, but many are common challenges for low-income households. Amidst rising costs for housing, transportation, and basic necessities, building emergency savings and assets is essential to reducing financial vulnerability. However, saving for the future can be difficult when so much of one's earnings go towards day-to-day expenses. Greater access to saving and asset-building opportunities can help families to make investments for education, retirement, or to create an emergency savings cushion. Many Canadians struggle with high levels of debt. People living on a low income are very likely to budget, but can still struggle to make ends meet when they are living in survival mode. Addressing financial issues related to debt can involve financial information or supports to create a plan to reduce one's overall debt levels, understand one's rights when dealing with debt collectors, and the pros and cons of bankruptcy. Next slide, please. People with low incomes and low or no assets and/or poor credit histories experience barriers to obtaining credit. Financial education enhances understanding about the legal and financial responsibilities of using credit, how to repair or build a credit history for the first time, and access a credit score. But access to small loans or secured credit cards are important to building credit history and learning to manage debt more effectively if it has been a challenge in the past. Next slide, please. Research in behavioral economics tells us that simply accessing the right information is only part of the solution. In addition to the kinds of financial challenges, like the ones we've just mentioned, many low-income Canadians live with worry, stress, or even a significant state of crisis. Worrying about money can reduce mental bandwidth so much that a person becomes unable to see a way beyond the immediate crisis at hand. This vicious cycle that people are poor because they are stressed and stressed because they are poor can easily last for generations without appropriate interventions. This means that people living in poverty need to access supports that help them overcome this vicious cycle as well as their financial barriers. Next slide, please. What we have on the screen is our financial empowerment framework, which breaks out the different ways that financial empowerment interventions can be used to address these struggles. Financial empowerment can take place in a number of environments, including governments, community service agencies, collaborative partnerships, and integrating into existing support services. Financial empowerment solutions can look slightly different depending on the person. Let's look at an example. Karen is someone currently struggling to make ends meet and living on a low income. She is a single parent with 2 children, and she recently went on a social assistance because her part-time income was not enough to support all of her basic expenses. She hasn't filed taxes in several years and has a lot of anxiety about doing this after so long. So, Karen is struggling and could benefit from more support. What can she do? Next slide, please. Karen has already taken the step to go on social assistance. She is eligible for this support because of her very low income level. Her caseworker recommends that she files her taxes at the local community tax clinic. Karen is nervous about this, but takes the recommendation because she trusts her caseworker's advice. Next, she makes a tax appointment. She files her taxes and discovers she is eligible for tax benefits and credits, including the GST credit and Canada Child Benefit. This gives her an income boost because she finds out she is eligible for years she did not file her taxes. The tax volunteer recommends a local financial coaching program that Karen can visit for free to help her decide how to use the income. Next, after meeting with the financial coach, she decides to use part of the money to pay off some debt, put some into savings, and the rest will help her make ends meet for the next month or 2. The financial coach also lets her know about the RESP program that will help her start education savings for her son. They make plans to set that up together, and the coach goes with her to the bank. Next slide, please. Many positive results have happened in this scenario. Karen's income boost from tax filing has helped her to address some of her financial barriers. She will also add to her income through tax credits and benefits, which will relieve some of her day-to-day financial concerns. She is building education savings by starting an RESP. By working with a financial coach, she is setting new goals to start repairing her credit score and build some emergency savings. Most importantly, her stress level has been reduced significantly. She has moved from simple survival mode towards opportunity mode and can start to make goals for the future. These kind of results are the ultimate goal of financial empowerment programs. Solutions will look slightly different from person to person and will depend on the kind of supports that are available and what their immediate needs are. Prosper Canada supports organizations in all sectors to integrate proven financial interventions in ways that are sustainable and impactful. Our vision is that all financially vulnerable Canadians have access to the programs, services, products, and advice they need to improve their financial well-being. As Canada's leading champion of financial empowerment, we identify and pilot interventions such as financial literacy, coaching and tax clinics, scale proven interventions in partnership with municipalities and charities nationwide. We build capacity in the field with training, tools, resources, and community of practice. And we also influence government policies that expand economic opportunity and asset building. Breaking down barriers to financial well-being is a big job, but our chances of success are much greater, and we will get there much faster if we can build a shared understanding of the problems and work on these solutions together. I am now so pleased to turn this over to our co-presenter today, Donna McBride, Director of Operations at Momentum. She will tell us more about their program delivery and partnerships as part of the financial empowerment approach.
Thank you, Glenna and Marlene. So this is how we represent financial empowerment in Calgary. We've taken the essence of the framework and sort of reduced it down into concepts that everyone in the community can understand. So reducing debt, growing savings, and building assets are what we're all about. Next slide, please. My goal today is just help you understand what our journey has been here in Calgary and maybe inspire you or send off something that says, oh, you know, maybe we can do this here. And so this is really going to be a case study, sort of illustrating what you've learned from Glenna and Marlene. So our journey began in 2012, really. So Momentum's been a community economic development organization in Calgary for 25 years now. And in 2012, the then Federal Minister of Finance, Jim Flaherty, was taking a growing interest in the financial health of Canadians, understanding that many of us needed help in understanding and managing our finances. And so in response to that, the Calgary United Way convened a roundtable of multi-sectoral representatives to sort of look at the issue here in Calgary and determine whether we needed a financial literacy collaborative here in Calgary to help address some of those needs, and really was there a need. So of course we decided that yes, we did have a need here for a collaborative. So in 2012, the Financial Futures Collaborative was born here in Calgary, and the United Way committed to providing part-time secretariat support. So in 2012, I attended the biannual CFED conference in Washington, D.C., where I was first exposed to the financial empowerment framework, shown here again on your screen. And what struck me was that what began in New York City was now being replicated in 11 major cities across the U.S. with great success. And I understood that if it was replicable in the U.S., then it could probably be replicated here as well. And at that same conference were members of Prosper Canada's staff, and for both of our organizations, the light just went on. Next slide, please. So here in Calgary, represented by the blue boxes at the bottom, those were the 5 initiatives or strategies or goals that our local financial literacy collaborative had already embarked on. And when I compared that to the 5 pillars of financial empowerment, the alignment was quite uncanny. And so what that said to me was that we could continue moving forward in much the same way, but if we embraced the framework, we could use the momentum that was building behind this movement in the U.S., and we could rely on their research to help make the case for the initiatives that we were involved in. Next slide, please. The biggest turning point in our journey was when our local collaborative here hosted the biannual Canadian ABLE conference using financial empowerment as its theme. And our friends in high places at Prosper Canada were instrumental in getting Jonathan Mintz, who was the then Commissioner of Consumer Affairs in New York City, to be the keynote speaker at our conference. So Jonathan Mintz had founded and co-chaired the groundbreaking Mayors for Cities for Financial Empowerment Coalition in the US, and he was the perfect person to inspire us to embrace financial empowerment here in Calgary. In addition to being a speaker at our conference, Jonathan also met with key members of our local city administration and key community group representatives, and he also met privately with Alberta's then Minister of Human Services, Dave Hancock, to educate and encourage governments to incorporate financial empowerment into their poverty reduction strategies. In the US, things are quite different at the municipal level than they are here in Canada, where most municipalities here in Canada do not have the ability to tax residents and use those taxes to do many of the same kinds of work. So while the framework made a lot of sense, how we would actually incorporate it here in Calgary was a little trickier to figure out. But having Jonathan Mintz come here, who was the real architect of this initiative in New York City, and have him come and inspire and bring all of his evidence-based research with him was truly groundbreaking here. Next slide, please. One of the greatest assets that we were both able to leverage and contribute to was Calgary's poverty reduction strategy called Enough for All. So that strategy took a few years to develop, and it's comprised of 4 sub-strategies, all designed to engage the community in a collective impact initiative so that everyone in Calgary, or that they would reduce poverty by 50% by 2023. And the place that financial empowerment fit beautifully in was the sub-strategy number 2, where everyone in Calgary has the income and assets needed to thrive. So finding our place in this municipal strategy that was gaining momentum and definitely gaining attention in the city, finding our place within this strategy really helped us garner the support and profile for financial empowerment, while helping us contribute to reducing poverty in Calgary. Next slide, please. So our financial literacy collaborative at that time was comprised of the partners that you see on your screen now. So the City of Calgary, the Province of Alberta, Vibrant Communities Calgary, Bow Valley College, Momentum, and United Way, all guided the Financial Literacy Collaborative, and were the ones that really took a look at the financial empowerment framework to see whether do we want to formally adopt this framework, and what would it take for us to do that. Next slide, please. One of the great assets that we also leveraged and we're really thankful for was using Tamarack's framework for collective impact. So we all know that collective impact sounds wonderful, but it isn't always easy to bring many different people around the table to work toward a common goal. But we had every one of our leadership team members, the partners that you saw on the previous slide, they took Tamarack's training around collective impact, and the United Way, which by this time was providing full-time secretariat support, has used this framework to influence its work in financial empowerment. So what we realized was that there was an environment surrounding us that was filled with resources on, how to create and mobilize initiatives, the financial empowerment framework, and then frameworks like this one from Tamarack that could help us actually sustain that. We all know that launching something and sustaining something are 2 very different things. And so we've relied on the expertise and the investments of lots of other people and organizations to both launch and sustain a successful initiative here in Calgary. And I have to say that, the major struggle that we've had in our collaborative work is identity. It's, how and when do you surrender your own identity as an organization and operate under one common equitable banner? So it's not easy, but it has definitely been worth it. Next slide, please. So what we did was, when we decided that we wanted to embrace the financial empowerment framework, we actually created a plan. And I just popped this up here to show you that I took a lot of teasing about this spreadsheet that I developed, but I have to say, you can't really see from here, but it's, every cell has notes in it, and it just went to help demonstrate to funders, to potential partners, that we had a plan, and it gave us focus and direction and credibility. And so we harnessed the expertise and activity that was already at work in our city and brought that work together under this common agenda. So we all know that a great idea isn't enough. You have to have a strategy to actually make that work. So this is our operational plan, and we built it around a 4-year template to align with the 4-year city budget process. And in this first 4-year plan, it had a $6 million price tag. And so that pretty much choked the people at the city particularly, but it was the starting point. And that's my point here, is like, make a plan and make sure that it, that it's in depth and it's well thought out, because it did help to show people that we were serious about this, and we could actually demonstrate the impact that these investments were going to make using the research that was coming out of the U.S. in some of their very successful initiatives. So we learned how to tell an economic story of investment, which was really important to our success here. Next slide, please. So this is just a little timeline illustrating that it didn't really take that long for us to get to the point that we're at today, where this only takes us to 2015, but our budget for our financial empowerment work here in Calgary is, $1 million in 2016 and about 1.3 budgeted in 2017. So it doesn't have to take very long, especially when you have other things in your environment that you can harness and work together to create truly great synergy. Next slide, please. Having the United Way embrace this concept of financial empowerment was a true game changer for us here in Calgary. So United Way had been providing secretariat support to our collaboratives here for, since 2012. But once they saw how serious we were about financial empowerment and the impacts that could make on poverty in our city, they realized that they wanted to and needed to really get behind promoting the initiative and actually raising money for it. And they made a 3-year commitment to raise $3 million for financial empowerment, and that has made all of the difference. They are not the only contributor to operationalizing these initiatives. We have funding from the City of Calgary, funding from the province of Alberta, funding from private foundations, etc. But United Way really mobilized their big, I'll call it a machine here in Calgary for sure, in terms of their ability to communicate with community, both the nonprofit community and the business community, and to harness the power of United Way campaigns to really get the message out. Next slide, please. So this is one of the examples of the beauty of the United Way machine is that in order to raise money in their campaigns, they have to create materials that are easily understood by potential donors. And so this is one example of a piece of material that they created to use all throughout the year, not just within the campaign, but it really tells a powerful message and gets some very important details out in front of people. So again, that's the beauty of harnessing the assets that you already have in your community. So United Way, through financial empowerment, among many other things, this is a very tangible way that they're actually doing work to reduce poverty in Calgary. So it's definitely a win-win for the United Way and for the collaborative, because as you can understand, it takes a lot of money to do things like this. Okay, next slide, please. So we have 6 initiatives here in Calgary that are all built around what our community needs the most. And so each of these 6 pillars of work has an annual target, a 4-year target, and a target that aligns with the 10-year Enough for All strategy, where they are mandated to achieve certain outcomes, etc. It's not just about inputs, it's actually about outcomes. Each of these 6 pillars of work is led by a community agency that has expertise in each of those different areas. So we have an operations table consisting of the community agencies that are responsible for operationalizing these pieces of work. And then our next step is, now that all 6 of these initiatives have been operationalized, now we need to take them to scale. And so we're convening a high-level leadership table consisting of people that are very connected in and have influence in large systems, such as Calgary Economic Development, such as Alberta Works, etc. So people that have the power to actually incorporate some of these initiatives into their huge operations. Next slide, please. So some of our keys to success I just want to point out because you probably have some of those very same keys in your own community. Next slide. So we had an already existing financial literacy collaborative that had just been operating probably for less than a year when we discovered the financial empowerment work going on in the US. So we used that as a springboard to move into financial empowerment. So you may well have the same thing, or you may have a collection of organizations doing similar work, but maybe not necessarily under a common or a collective impact banner yet. Next slide. We also had a municipal poverty reduction strategy, and we found our place in that. So that allowed us to sort of go right on the coattails of the public awareness that was being created because of the strategy, and it allowed us our place to make a meaningful contribution to the reduction of poverty in Calgary. Next slide, please. Thirdly, and really importantly, is that we have paid secretariat support through the United Way, and we pay our community partners for their leadership and outcomes in those 6 initiatives. When we entered into this, and this is largely because of my experience at Momentum, a nonprofit organization, we decided as a collaborative that we were not going to ask nonprofit organizations to do more for no more. And so our operational plan and our budgets include a piece of money each year for those organizations to lead that body of work, and they're contractually obligated to meet the outcomes in that body of work and to continuously improve and stay on top of best practices, etc. So we want quality work, and we recognize that we have to, and we're willing to pay organizations to achieve that. Last slide. And so finally, we use the credibility of other people and other structures to help to build our own. And so as soon as I recognized the strong alignment between the work we were already doing here in Calgary and the financial empowerment framework, it reminded me of a line in a Tragically Hip song that says, "I can't draw, but I can trace." So we used the success of that framework in the US. We used the success of Tamarack's collective impact strategies and backbone, the 6 keys to being a successful backbone organization. We used the success of the United Way and their ability to raise money and communicate messaging. We used the municipal poverty reduction strategy, etc. So it really has been a collective effort that we honestly never thought of one unique thing ourselves, but we drew from other people. So I'm confident that across Canada, there's lots of things that you yourself in your own community can leverage, and it's just a matter of pulling everybody together and staying at the table until the work is done. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you, Donna and Glenna and Marlene, for sharing the financial empowerment framework with us. First of all, for everyone on the line, we will be sharing out resources afterwards, and you can go deeper if you'd like on really exploring the financial empowerment framework initiatives like introduction to education and counseling, helping people get access to benefits and tax credits, affordable and safe products, and building savings and that kind of thing. And I think what we're hearing a lot is about this asset-based approach to this work, which I think a lot of our vibrant communities are looking at with our collaborative poverty reduction strategies, and it was such a great example, Donna, that you provided of how Calgary is doing that, and working with what's in the community, and then working with the assets that people already have. This idea of, I think it kind of takes that idea of the sustainable livelihoods framework and really builds on, when we can develop these assets, provide people with access to the systems that are already there, and build that financial basis, there are so many other things that fall into place. And as some of you might know, we're looking at financial empowerment in vibrant communities right now as a game changer strategy for poverty reduction, which if you invest maybe relatively moderately, you see all of these ripple effects happening in poverty reduction, such as being able to access more housing, child care, early childhood development, and that kind of thing. So I think it was a great presentation, and we'll definitely share the recording and the slides out once we're done with everybody on the line. I think we'll take the time to move into questions right now. Allison, if you go to the next slide. There were a couple that were submitted in advance. And so the first, oh, sorry, you know what? I was supposed to hand this back over to Marlene and Glenna to do a follow-up. I apologize for stepping in. Glenna,
no worries,
Marlene,
Natasha.
did you want to talk about next steps now?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I just want to echo what you said about Donna's great presentation and how inspiring it is to hear about Momentum's approach to delivering collaboration on the ground. And I just want to also take this opportunity to, for those of you that haven't heard yet, that Momentum has been chosen as one of our 5 national financial empowerment champions that Prosper Canada will partner with over the next 4.5 years to expand the delivery of these interventions across Canada. So, it's just to go to show how great their work is and how much we view them as a champion in this work. So with all of that, for those of you on the call who are perhaps more interested now in figuring out how your organization or community can get more involved in these kinds of efforts, we've just provided a few suggested next steps for you. So one would be obviously to connect to other communities of practice or organizations in your local area that are already doing this work to learn more about it. And there's some links there about organizations such as FCAC, where there's a database that lists different organizations that are already doing this kind of work. In addition, you feel free to browse Prosper Canada's website. You can learn more about the concepts we've talked about today and the work that's underway already across Canada through our website. And there's a number of resources as well and reports and publications that you might find helpful. And then most definitely feel free to contact myself. I've provided my contact information as well as the director of our programs here, Adam Fair. If you have any additional questions or interested in exploring how you and your local community, municipality, or organization can get more involved in these kind of initiatives more locally, more than happy to chat with you. That's all on my end, Natasha.
All right, thanks very much. Allison, if you go to the next slide now, I believe that takes us into the question period. And actually, I know we're going to start with the pre-webinar questions, but there was one that I think just builds on what you guys were talking about. If people wanted to get more involved, there was one that came through specifically about small service providers. Would you have any recommendations on how, for small service providers who wanted to get access to the kind of training you provide around financial coaching and literacy and that kind of thing? Can you speak at all to any advice that you'd have or the best avenues to connect through?
I can start on that in terms of Prosper Canada. We do offer frontline facilitator training resources, and so if that's something as a starting point that a smaller organization would be interested in exploring, that's definitely something that we can discuss. I know that Donna and her organization in Calgary also does the same. Donna, do you want to speak to that as well?
We do have financial literacy Train the Trainer. We also have a financial coaching program here run through Bow Valley College. And one of the things nationally, so again, understanding, how relatively new financial empowerment is in Canada, our national ABLE network, one of the new committees that we're forming is designed to help replicate this work in cities across Canada. And one of the things that we're going to start off by doing is creating a series of case histories of what's going on in small municipalities and larger ones, and maybe you can find your place and sort of replicate what you're hearing. But I would say that if you were looking for financial coaching specifically, I'm not sure if Prosper Canada is intending to offer some financial coaching training and support nationally. I know that we do that here in Calgary. If you want to come to Calgary, you're more than welcome to do that, but maybe I'll turn it back.
Yeah, no, Donna, that's a great question, and to your point, yes, financial coaching definitely is one of the more emerging and less developed interventions across Canada. And we are a national organization, and we're definitely looking for opportunities to support building the capacity of our other organizations to do this kind of work. We do have a number of pilots that for different models of financial coaching delivery, some volunteer models, frontline service financial coaching in nonprofit organizations. So if this is something of interest that you would like to explore in your organization, again, feel free to contact me and we can discuss that further about what that could potentially look like.
And again, we'll be providing the slides that have your contact information with the follow-up email after the presentation is done today. Okay, and then so actually moving to the pre-webinar questions that were submitted, there was one question about are there any resources adapted to persons with intellectual abilities? Because low literacy and reading levels adds another layer of challenge to finances. Glenna, Marlene, are you able to speak to that at all, or any thoughts from you as well, Donna?
This is Donna. Maybe I can jump in first here. Through our Train the Trainer program here at Momentum, we have a published financial literacy curriculum, and we had two other versions of our curriculum developed. One was for people with developmental disabilities. So we had a local organization who specializes in, they call it plain language, but it's designed for people with intellectual disabilities who over the years have developed more and more independence and control over their own finances, but maybe haven't been given the skills to be able to appropriate those as well as they could. So we do have a curriculum here in Calgary for that, and it's, you know, just contact us here, and maybe Prosper has something as well.
So it definitely is an area that Prosper is continuing to develop. We do have our materials in plain language, but definitely to the level of literacy that perhaps individuals with intellectual disabilities require is still a work in progress. That being said, we are actually in partnership with an organization called Plan out of Vancouver, British Columbia, and we're building an online tool that actually provides it's called a future planning tool, and it actually provides information and resources to families and individuals that are living with intellectual disabilities. And we're hoping to have that launch early next year. And all to say that persons with disabilities definitely is a very important subgroup within the larger group of vulnerable Canadians. And so with all of the subpopulations, Prosper Canada is continue looking to collaborate with partners on the ground who have the expertise around these specific populations to tailor our work to meet the needs and the barriers that those individuals are facing. So again, it's an evolving field, but that's definitely part of the process that we're on right now.
We actually had, and I think you might have been on that call. One of our previous communities of practice at the beginning of the month was with our practitioners who are working with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit populations. And we had a great conversation on the First Nations financial wellness project that you're doing with Prosper, that you're doing there in Prosper Canada in Ontario with First Nations who are living on the reserves. Marlene, Glenna, I was just wondering if you would like to talk at all, like even briefly, just about what you're doing with in terms of financial empowerment with First Nations on reserves?
Sure, I'd be happy.
Kind of vulnerable target group.
Exactly, and so that's a great example. So right now, through the funding of the Ontario Trillium Foundation, Prosper Canada is partnering with 4 different First Nation communities across Ontario and collaborating with AFOA Canada, so Association of Aboriginal Financial Officers Association, I apologize, of Canada, who again have the expertise in terms of understanding the context that our community partners are actually working in. And so one of the outputs of that particular project, not only to help build the capacity of these communities to deliver financial empowerment interventions to meet the needs of their members, but also to look at our curriculum and our resources to tailor it so that it's appropriate for the context that these communities are in, both from a cultural perspective, how these communities actually think about financial empowerment and financial wellness. And it's actually been a fascinating learning opportunity for us. But all to be said, like, we appreciate that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to these interventions. And you know, philosophy behind what we do is definitely meeting people where they are. And so, you know, that's kind of the underlying principle of that project as well. Another example of what we're doing in that project is looking how to integrate tax filing within these communities, and what that means specifically in terms of logistics and understanding the geographical limitations of some of these communities and how to support them in a way that meets their geographic barriers, but also the financial literacy barriers within those communities. So, you know, similar to what we are aiming to do with our materials for persons with disabilities.
That's great, thanks. Going back to the pre-webinar questions, we had one about how do you start having that conversation about building those savings with people who are kind of struggling to make ends meet and might not see themselves in a position to start saving yet.
first of all, there's not much saving that's going to go on $600 a month. And so part of the work of this integrated approach, so what we do here in Calgary is we have 6 different initiatives, but they're all designed to be able to be very connected to others. And so if someone were to come to Momentum and wanted financial coaching, then we could look at their situation and see that, wow, you know, especially in a place like Calgary, which is very expensive to live in, you're going to have to access some other community benefits. So they may not know about other resources that are available to them. So we're accountable to do all of those things. We might help them get into a matched savings program where if they were able to, you know, carve some savings off each month, can we help them to multiply those savings and then use those to buy a productive asset such as education or tools for work, etc. So we're working off of one another, but this brings up the point that part of our work here also involves work at the systems level. So advocating for the improvement and development of policies that actually will help people move out of poverty. And so that's work that the United Way has policy people working on, Momentum has policy people working on, and so we're always advocating for a better system so that people don't have to try to figure out how to live on $600 a month, because it's just not possible. And so this work on the ground is really helping to bring alive the policy work that we're doing. So it's a longer road for sure, but it's happening simultaneously to the delivery of frontline services.
Great. And then going back to the conversation that we were having about the courses that you provide, we have a couple of questions in the questions box about the curriculum. And so the first one is just about how the Momentum and the Prosper Canada Train the Trainer courses compare. Maybe if we wanted to start with Marlene and then Donna, you can each let us know. I don't know if you've had that conversation before, or if you can let us in on it at all. And then also, are those curriculums that you're providing on Train the Trainers available to people anywhere to be able to access?
Prosper can go
Donna,
first.
do you want me to start with that, or do you want to take that?
No, you go ahead. I'll chime in later.
Okay. I would say that the general principles in terms of the types of concepts that are between the two curriculums are quite similar. I know that they're based on the same financial empowerment framework, so there might be some slight differences in terms of how they're facilitated, but I would say generally speaking, Donna, correct me if I'm wrong, that there is definitely a strong underlining kind of similarity between the two.
Mm-hmm. I think the biggest defining difference between Prosper's curriculum and Momentum's is that we have taken a social enterprise approach with our curriculum, and we actually charge organizations to take our training, whereas Prosper has had funding in the past that allowed them to do that for free. So organizations, could access Prosper's training and curriculum free, but they couldn't with Momentum's. However, times are changing, and what we've had to realize here at Momentum is that with the growing proliferation of curriculum available online for free, we've had to relook at our model, and we've substantially reduced the cost for organizations to take our curriculum, but we still do charge a small fee because we really believe that having some skin in the game makes a difference for organizations. But at the same time, people can come from anywhere to take our training. We travel lots of places to deliver this training for sure, but the basic principles are the same. And I think what we've really come to understand is that the key to successful use of the curriculum is understanding how people who live on low incomes, how best to facilitate in an audience like that, understanding that many times they could teach us how to manage our finances because they've become such experts. And so, you know, using the principles of adult learning where everyone in the room has something to learn and something to teach, just helping people understand how to leverage the assets and the knowledge in the room so that you're imparting what they don't know with, you know, tremendous respect and understanding and relativity to their situation.
And if I could just quickly add to that, Donna, that if we do have funding, yes, we do offer the training for free. We also do some trainings that are for a fee, so we do have an online course that we facilitate as well, that if there's funding, we can offer it on an invitation basis. But that if there are organizations that do have the resources to pay for some of the training, if that's also available. I also want to say that we are moving towards putting our curriculum more openly accessible online, and that's one of our big initiatives this year. There are certain aspects of the curriculum that are freely available, but we really want to move to a more open source approach, and so you can kind of look forward or anticipate that in the coming months as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Perfect, thanks. And I think we have time for one last question. We have Val who is asking or interested in knowing if and when information on the resources from the pilots of the 4 Indigenous communities in Ontario might be available for other providers to access across the country. And I think we have to ask that question understanding that it's a pretty new initiative.
Yeah, no, definitely. So that the materials are definitely still under development, but as similar to our more standard curriculum, the idea is with all of our tools and resources to help support a community of practice around this work is to make that more freely available and accessible. So when they are in a form that is appropriate for dissemination, we'll definitely start sharing that in some capacity to those that are interested. And feel free to sign up to be a part of our newsletter so that you be part of a network, so that when those communications or updates come out, you'll be kind of informed of that.
That's great. Thank you so much. And thank you again, Marlene, Glenna, and Donna, for being part of today's webinar and for sharing with us about financial empowerment and the framework for poverty reduction and how that looks in Calgary. As well to everybody who is on the line today and for your thoughtful questions and comments. Allison, if you go to the next slide, we just ask that you stay in touch with Vibrant Communities, Cities Reducing Poverty, receive the latest thinking and news, tools, and resources from the poverty reduction community by subscribing to our e-newsletter, Cities Connect, which you will see on the screen, or join our online learning community, Vibrant Communities Canada. It's a learning site for poverty reduction practitioners, and you can see the website there is www.vibrantcanada.ca. If you go on to the next slide, you'll see some of our other upcoming learning opportunities that you might be interested in. Recently, we've been partnering with our sister Deepening Community Learning Community site to look at neighborhood-based strategies for poverty reduction. We've looked at Toronto's Parkdale Land Trust model, and we've looked at Edmonton's 1,000 Families Initiative and actually how they're using the Sustainable Livelihoods Asset Building approach, and we'll continue that December 8th, 1 o'clock till 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time with Baltimore's Promise Neighborhood approach. And so this one is actually looking at how the Promise Neighborhoods Institute is supporting the transformation of Promise Neighborhoods, which are communities of opportunity that are centered around strong schools. So the initiative is led by Policy Link and aims to improve educational and developmental outcomes of children and youth in the most distressed communities by identifying and building more capacity around the community supports that are already geared towards achieving results for children and youth. So we'll look specifically at Baltimore's neighborhood approach, look at some of the strengths and challenges in the community, and get some of their keys to success. And on the next slide, you'll see that also in December, Vibrant Communities is hosting a webinar with Chris Soderquist from Pontifex Consulting, and he'll talk to us about 3 core competencies that are needed for any community engagement. And so they've identified these 3 core competencies as systems thinking, conversational capacity, and yes to the mess. And so he'll go over with us some of the reasons why these things aren't identified when doing community engagement, and we'll have a question and discussion period on how you can develop these capacities. So both of those links will be coming to you in the follow-up email with the recording after this session. If you go to the next page, or the next slide, I will just wrap up and say thank you. Let us know what you thought of today's webinar. You can send any of your questions, comments, and feedback to me at natasha@tamarackcommunity.ca.